So Kate, your financial advisor shared with me that the main reason you were coming in was to get a better understanding of how your estate will pass on to your heirs. And he also expressed that you had a lot of interest in understanding specific assets, and I think it had to do with your rental properties, your real estate, and how that specifically might go down to the kids.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, I'm concerned about liquidity and who controls it and a lot of things like that.
Okay. Is there anything else as a focus area that you wanted to concentrate on today?
No, I'd like to figure out, should I be liquidating some real estate in order to create more liquidity in my estate, or can we hold on to it as an investment? I just want to figure out how to pass it, and I'd like my kids to end up with it.
Okay, that makes sense. So probably the best way to approach this is for me to get a better understanding of what you're trying to accomplish in a larger picture. So if I'm going to make some recommendations based on those specific issues that you're talking about, I want to make sure I understand more about how you feel about your kids, your charities, specific assets, as you were talking about, how they go to your kids. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So I'd like to ask you some questions to start, if you're okay with that. Let me start with the easy. How old are you?
65.
Okay. And I understand that you're not married, but you're widowed.
That's right.
How long ago did your husband pass away?
About 11 years.
Okay. Are you with anybody right now? Do you have any significant others?
I do, but we don't share money, and he has his own kids and his own money, so we have no intention of getting married.
Oh, okay. Do you have any desire, if you were to pass away, to have any of your estate or your money benefit him?
No, he doesn't.
Planning his own? No. Okay, that makes sense. And children? How many children do you have?
Three.
And what are their names?
Sam is my oldest, Jane, and John.
Okay. How old is Sam?
48.
Is Sam married?
Yes, he just got married 2 years ago. Susan, first marriage.
Okay. Any kids?
Actually, they do. They had a child about 6 or 7 months ago.
Oh, very good.
It was a ambitious thing to do.
And what's the baby's name?
Sarah.
Sarah.
Get the Sam, Sarah.
That's very cute. Very nice. And then how old is Jane?
46.
Okay.
46.
And is Jane married?
Yes, been married for a long time.
And what's Jane's husband's name?
Jeff.
Jeff. And do they have any children?
3 kids. Malcolm is 13. Simone is 9, and Akila is 6. 7. 6 or 7.
Okay.
They grow fast.
Okay. And how about John? How old's John?
John's 42, almost 43.
Married?
He's been living with the same woman for quite a while, and they own a business together.
Ah, okay.
Her name's Michelle.
Michelle. But they're not married. Do they have any children?
Yes, they have a child together, Zach, who is 4.
Okay.
And he has a child by a prior relationship that we're very close to. Her name is Sky, and she's 14.
Okay. Okay, so just kind of having to do with the dynamics of the families. Are there any marital issues, any creditor issues, any things that you're concerned about with any of the marriages?
No, they're all in good shape now. I mean, they've all had bumpy rides one way or the other, except for Sam, and they're all well established. My 2 younger kids own their own businesses.
Okay.
They're all good.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, as far as the children and grandchildren go, are there any special needs, any drug issues, any things that you're concerned about, any spendthrift issues, their ability to manage assets? Take care of themselves, all of that stuff.
Some of them are pretty young.
Yeah.
No, I guess the only thing is my oldest granddaughter, who is my son's
Scott.
Yeah, Scott. I don't know that he and his current relationship will take care of her as well as I would like her to be taken care of. So I've taken special responsibility of her, and I'll pay for her college and make sure she gets on her feet okay.
Okay. Do you currently pay for anything right now for her?
Right now, there are no needs. As she was growing up, there were, but right now, there's nothing special she needs.
Do you have anything set up for college currently, or you just
Just figure I'll pay for it as it comes.
Okay. It sounds like if you're not here, you'd still want that to happen.
Yeah, and I think, based on what I've done in the trust, I've left them enough money that what I've left to the grandkids will pay for college.
Okay. So that's an interesting, we'll talk more about the trust. One of the decisions that you're going to make is, do you want to put money specifically aside for Sky's college or any of the grandchildren's education? Or do you want to leave that money to the kids and let them allocate it? Now, in many cases, that's what you would do, as you described. If you thought there was any competing interest or some things that would cause that not to work, that's a good example of something in the trust, the detail that we would put. So you don't have to make a decision about that now, but let me just make a notation. Yeah, exactly. So are you currently caring for anybody?
No.
Any family members, parents?
No, my stepfather is alive. He's not well, but he's fine. He's married. He's got money. And I have a sister that I don't care for. She's married. If anything happened to her husband, I'd probably help her financially.
Okay. What's her name?
Judy.
Okay. If something happened to you, this is the same kind of question. If something happened to you, would you want this estate to provide any help or care to her?
You know, I haven't thought about that at all, but the truth is I probably would, only because I don't want her to be in bad financial straits if I die before her.
Okay.
So I would.
And
I haven't done anything about it.
Okay. So that's one of the things when we talk about your trust, we talk about things that can be done, that's one of the things that we would add. We would add to that. Do you anticipate taking care of anybody else? Okay.
Myself.
Yourself.
For a long time.
That's a good idea. As far as gifting goes, do you currently gift to anybody?
Formally, no. But the truth is, all during the years, I've taken care of whatever they need.
Yeah.
But I don't make formal gifts. I haven't made formal gifts.
Okay.
I mean, I don't write them big checks.
So you're just paying for things to take care of them. Are you paying for any of their health care?
I haven't anymore. So for the last couple of years, I haven't done much.
Okay.
But previously, we took care of their health insurance, different ones all the time. A couple of them needed help with their businesses, and I gave them money to help with their businesses. But
were those gifts or loans?
Officially, they weren't anything.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
Nothing's getting
I
recorded.
think, the truth is I am carrying a piece of paper on about $60,000 for one of my kids.
And the reason I'm asking this specific question is if you weren't here, is there something you'd want to continue? So there's always the discussion about what I want to leave them, and then what I would want to occur as if I were the one directing it.
No, I think they're all okay now.
Okay. Have you made any large gifts in the past? Have you filed an estate tax return, a gift tax return?
No.
Okay. Do you anticipate making any?
No, not necessarily.
Okay. So as far as who's in control of your estate, I've read your trust. We'll talk about that in a second. You're the trustee. And because that's a revocable trust, you can make any changes that you want. If you weren't capable of being the trustee of your trust, either because you passed away or you're disabled, you have Sam as the successor trustee. Is that who you would currently have too?
He understands the real estate.
He understands the real estate. Would there be any negative dynamic of Sam with the trustee over his siblings in controlling the money?
I consistently worry about that, but I don't know who else to do it. I don't have an alternative. I don't want to put him in a bad situation. But
Yep. So that's something we would probably talk a little bit more about, whether it made sense to have Sam work with a co-trustee, whether we have somebody who if Sam could specifically look over the investment aspects of the trust and have somebody else manage the dispositive, how everything goes down.
That's an interesting idea.
There's a few different ways to do it, but that's another item that I'll kind of mark for a further discussion. If Sam were not capable or resigned, who would be the next? Because you don't have anybody there.
I don't have any. I don't.
Okay. So we'd actually want to have a discussion about, I know as odd as this sounds, someone after Sam and someone after that person, to make sure that you're in a position that everything happens the way you want it to happen. Because what would happen is, obviously, if there was nobody, there'd be a court-appointed trustee. The document has some guidelines as to how it's supposed to be filled in, and that may not be, that may not help you get to where you want to go. Are there any specific assets that you have that you want to go to specific people?
Not really, but I do. One of the reasons we're having this discussion is because I'd like to make sure that the kids can keep the real estate. I don't have any emotional attachment to it, but I think in the financial environment we're in that it's probably the best investment they could make. It's all Los Angeles real estate, and I'd like them to be able to retain that, and the reason I want Sam to be there is to make decisions about that. I think it makes sense for them to keep it. If he decides it doesn't, I'm not trying to control it, but
I mean, that makes
I'd
sense.
like to make sure he can
So let me just say that back to you. It sounds like you're saying you like the value of the real estate portfolio, you think it's a good long-term portfolio, but you don't want to limit Sam or anyone's authority to change the nature of investments in the future if something changes. Is that fair?
That's exactly right.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Is there anything else that we've missed regarding how you want people who are treated? Any concerns that you have about your family?
I think it may be obvious, I don't know, but I am I am interested in making sure that the grandkids get as much as they can. When we did the trust this last time, I mean, I understand that what I can pass directly to grandchildren is limited, but, you know, my kids are old enough that I think they're going to be okay. And they were my husband's kids. I don't know if I told you that, but I've always thought of them as mine. That's why they're as old as they are.
Okay.
So I think they're going to be okay. But by the time my grandkids are, you know, later adults, they could be in a really challenging economic time. We don't know what's going to happen. I'd rather make sure they get as much money as they can.
Okay. All right. And I've read your trust, so I can give you some input about that. But clearly, getting as much to the grandchildren as we can is important. Trying to retain as much of the real estate portfolio intact to provide their income is important. As you talked about, Judy, making sure there's going to be some support, that we talk that through.
Yeah, if I go first.
If you go first, right? Making sure for college that we take care of Sky, in case you're not here to see that. And there's some trustee issues, making sure we have the right successor trustees. So I think we've captured everything. We might come across some more items as we kind of go through this. So what I'd like to do is now take a little time to take a look at what you have in place. So this is what you would like to have happen. You have a trust, and that trust basically dictates most of how everything will go down to your kids. So a trust really has two major functions. One is the dispositive function, how everybody gets everything and when they get it. And the other really is the law side of it, which talks about how it interacts with the IRS tax code, wealth transfer, people think of them as death taxes. I'd like to spend a little bit of time and just kind of show you how those two interact. And that'll give us an opportunity to see exactly where the gaps are. And from there, we'll probably spend some time looking at what our potential solutions are. Does that make sense?
Great.
Okay. I'd like to spend a little time, as I said, just kind of talking about how your trust interacts with your estate. There are some estate transfer tax code things I want to talk to you about, but really I want to also take a close look at how the language that you've written in the trust impacts what you'd like to have happen here, because I already see some disparities, which I'll cover with you.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So I've looked at your trust. It's about 2 years old. When I review a trust, we're really looking at how that trust impacts you. If there's any changes, we would definitely work with your estate planning attorney to make sure that they're the ones that make the changes. Let me start by just describing to you where you are. Okay. Now you have basically a main trust today that was created after your husband passed away. And you probably think of that as a survivor's trust?
I think of it as my money.
That's a better name for it. We'll call it the Your Money Trust. What is the value of your total estate, if you were to estimate, with this total value of the estate?
About 21 million, something like that.
Would that be net of loans?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. So we've got about a $21 million estate. And this trust dictates how that goes down to your kids and what happens from a tax standpoint. In order for me to really diagram this out, I'd like to get a little more information about specifics on your assets, if that's all right. What is your residence value?
About $2.5 million.
Okay.
I have a loan on it. Whatever's right below the jumbo limits, we just redid it.
I think it's around $600,000? Okay. Do you have any second homes, any vacation properties?
Yeah, we have a condo in Laguna. We don't use it that much anymore. It sounds terrible. It's only worth about $2 million, but it's
that's California real estate. Yeah,
and it's got $1 million left on the loan.
Okay. Do you have any other vacation or
no? That's it.
Kind of casual property? What about? I think obviously you have real estate. I think you mentioned, your financial advisor mentioned you had commercial real estate and rental properties?
We have 3, they're not duplexes, 4plexes.
Okay.
And those are the ones we paid off. When my husband died, we had real estate. We paid off those mortgages. So today, altogether, they're worth about $8 million.
Okay. And there's no liabilities on those?
No.
Okay. And you have other real estate also?
So I've got 3 commercial buildings. I'm in partnership on one of them. Each of them is about 50% leveraged. So we have about a loan on.
All 3 of them are leveraged?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're all together about $12 million.
Okay.
And $6 million in total loans.
Okay. All right. Is there any other real estate that you have?
Nope, that's it.
Do you have any?
Oh, you know what? I don't, but when my husband died, we put his trust together, the trust.
Yep.
We put some rental properties, 2 little rental houses that we used to live in. Actually, we moved out of one, rented it, moved out, and rented again. And they're both in that B trust.
Ah, okay. Do you know what the value of the rental properties are?
Yeah, it's only about 1.2.
Okay.
They were worth $1 million when we put them in there 11 years ago. But they went down and down and down, and then they started to come back. And long story short, they're worth about $1 million.
And you're the trustee, right, of that trust?
I am.
Do you take any income from that trust?
No, all the rent gets reinvested, and actually the reason that we've reinvested in the property itself, fixing it up a little bit.
Oh, okay.
But Sam actually takes care of that completely.
Okay.
Even though I'm the trustee, I don't have anything.
That makes sense. Do you know about what the total of the rent is that comes out of that trust?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't.
Okay, so that's something we'll probably want to figure out. Are there any other partnerships that you're in with anybody?
No, just one of the, as I mentioned, one of the
for the commercial real estate.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. So as far as stocks, bonds, mutual funds, investments, all of that stuff, I know you have some here at the firm.
Yeah, with Morgan Stanley here, I have John $1.6 million.
Okay.
And then I have a Kroll Weeden account that's all bonds.
Okay.
It's around $600,000.
All right. Do you have any other cash accounts or anything else? Do you have
No,
any
it's
personal
all
trading
mixed in with
accounts?
the Morgan Stanley.
Okay. Do you have any qualified accounts? Do you have like IRAs, anything?
Yeah,
like
my
that?
husband's IRA. It's $1.2 million.
Okay. Okay. Do you have any life insurance?
Not anymore. When my husband died, I got rid of it.
You got rid of your life insurance? Okay. What was the reason that you had the life insurance?
We both had it to pay off. Remember, this whole real estate sort of happened like Topsy. We weren't. We looked like we made really intelligent decisions. We made accidental decisions that turned out well. That's what really happened. We moved from one house into another house, and then moved into the fourplex, and then moved out of that fourplex. You know,
okay.
That's how it all happened. And along the way, we bought life insurance to pay off the loans on things. And so we had it on both of us.
Is that how you paid off the loan you said at your husband's passing? You paid off. How much life insurance did you have in place then?
About $2 million.
Ah, okay. All right, that makes sense. So you don't have any right now? Okay. Do you have any annuities?
No, John tells me annuities are terrible things.
Well, I'll leave that up to John. That's his area of expertise. Are there any other assets that you have that I have not? Do you have any significant collections? Are you going to inherit anything large?
My stepfather will probably leave about $200,000 or more, not a lot.
Okay.
And can I just get that to my kids? I don't need that, and it seems silly for me to take it.
That is a good question. So you can certainly inherit, and you can certainly give it to your kids, and there's some rules that govern that. If your father doesn't care, or your stepfather doesn't care, it might make more sense to talk to him about leaving it directly to your kids. How large is his estate?
Not large. I mean, when he dies, he may have no more than $400,000, and there's
okay. So I'll make a note. That's probably one of the things we would want to discuss. That's a conversation you would have with him, but I'm assuming.
Yeah, he'll do it if I want him to.
Yeah, no, that's probably a good idea.
Okay.
And that's something that we would do within his estate plan, and not within yours, unless it ended up coming to you. Okay, so you think I've got everything captured? All right. So let me kind of describe to you. As I said, I read your trust. Let me tell you what your trust says. It says that you have what you call the My Money Trust. And in there is your gross estate. And I think you're saying your gross estate is right around 22 million, because you have about $8 million in loans based on the asset list that we just went through. Right. So the only thing that would not be in your trust would be the IRA.
Right.
And the IRA you said is worth about $1 million too. So today, just to keep things simple, in your trust you have about 21 million.
No, I think it's 20, and this is the one.
Thank you. You have 20 million in your trust, and you have a little over $1 million in your IRA. Okay.
And then there's that $1 million in the B trust. But that doesn't count in this, does it?
It doesn't count in what is potentially taxable.
Okay.
So let me explain that. In your trust, which is completely revocable, which means you can make any changes, you have a bunch of rules in your trust, and I was taking a look at those rules. Those rules really govern how the money's going to go down to your kids. So there's a couple things that you said were important to you that you've dealt with to some degree within this trust. And as I describe this, I'll tell you where that is. Currently, if something were to happen to you, so at your passing, because while you're alive, like we said, you're going to do anything you want, your trust says that your money is supposed to be broken up into buckets. And we can think of them as 4 buckets. One of the buckets is going to your grandchildren. At the time this trust was originally written, because it's been revised a few times, it was $1 million. It's basically a number that can skip a generation.
The
generation skipping,
right.
yeah, exactly. So this trust says to maximize the amount of generation skipping, which is a little over $5 million today. So if we put aside taxes for a second, you will be able to get $5 million into a trust for your grandchildren. The language of that trust for the generation skipping says that your children have access to it for health, education, and maintenance and support, and that your children, actually Sam is the trustee for that thing, but ultimately when they're gone, it goes right to the grandchildren. So it sits in suspense until they're gone. Is that what you want?
Well, if I die before they go through school, that's the money they should be using to go to college.
Okay. Okay.
So they can't do that today? Can Sam use it for their education today? I thought he could.
So yes, the trustee would use it. I think your question is, can they use it for education now? Absolutely.
Okay.
It's just
That was my understanding.
Yeah, and the point that I'm making is that the $5 million that goes in there will not go to your other kids.
Right.
And you're comfortable with that because it's a bigger number than when you first wrote the trust.
I know, but they're older now. I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. So the rest of your estate would get divided according to your trust, 1/3 to each child. The grandchildren get their share within the generation skipping, and then your kids get the difference, and we'll go through the numbers. The other trust that we have here is your bypass trust that you mentioned that had real estate in it. It's got $1.2 million in the real estate, right? Its language says that at your passing it's divided equally into the 3 children. I don't know how easy it will be to divide that real estate into 3 kids. So you really can't do anything about the nature of that. You can change the nature of the assets invested in it as the trustee. But that's something just to think about. If you think all 3 kids are going to want 1/3 of it, that makes sense. If you think you want to change how it's invested, that's something also to think about. By the way, that trust can swap with your trust. You may decide, I'd like to buy some of that real estate and put it in yours, leave cash. So again, I'll just kind of note that as something to think about. You were asking about whether I should or shouldn't sell stuff. This is probably something just to understand better.
But right now, that's got, hasn't grown that much.
Yeah.
I was just trying to think of capital gains tax, but okay.
Yeah, and I assume that trust has been paying its taxes along the way, right? Okay, all right, that makes sense. So if we take a look at what happens at your passing, we're saying that the contents of that bypass trust, because it resulted from the credit that your husband had when he passed away, there would be 0 taxes on that. All right. If we take a look at the IRA, and have you had a discussion with your financial advisor about how IRAs work in stretching?
Spread it out for the beneficiaries that if I die, they'll take it over a long period of time.
Okay, so you've said in that IRA that if you're gone, the kids get it 1/3 each, and they can decide to stretch it or not.
Yes.
You've left them the discretion.
Yeah, they can take it out.
Okay.
Like I do, in installments every year.
So there's 2 taxes embedded in here. One of them is the income tax, which you will deal with when you start taking distribution. That can't go away. And the other is the estate tax or the transfer tax. That can be up to about 72% if they actually surrendered it, but I'm assuming they'd have good guidance from your advisor and they would stretch it, which means they'd pay the income taxes as they took the distribution.
Right, that was the intent.
Okay, so the estate tax would still be there. So in this case, on $1.2 million, you've got about $600,000, approximately, in estate tax. The rate's about 48%, but it's a declining rate.
Okay.
So whatever the prevailing rate is at the time that you pass away,
that's what they have to pay.
that'll be about $600,000. All right. That's a bad asset, by the way, to try to take $600,000 out, because every dollar you take out, you have to pay income taxes on. So that's something we're going to keep an eye on.
That makes sense.
Does that make sense? So if we take a look at your total estate, you've got $20 million outside of what we just discussed. You have a credit yourself of $5.2 million. So that leaves us about $15 million subject to, people call these death taxes, but they're really transfer taxes. If you transfer your wealth to others, you can with limitations. And one of the limitations is you can only transfer up to 5.2 using your lifetime credit, and then you have the ability, you probably heard, you can transfer $13,000 each during your life. So we would assume, since you haven't used your life credit, that it would get applied here, which would mean we'd have about $15 million. And again, the transfer tax rate, if we use about 50% average, there's about $7.5 million of taxes here. So somewhere around 8.1 of taxes within your about $22 million estate. Okay.
Now, can that tax be paid from the kids' amount so that the grandkids get the whole 5?
Yes. So what happens is, before the trustee distributes anything, the trustee is going to pay taxes. we can write language in the trust that says your desire is to maximize the generation skipping completely and pay the taxes from the other amount.
Okay.
So what that would mean in this example is $5 million that would come right off the top and go to the generation skipping would be $15 million. From that $15 million, I think this is a better way to say it, we know we have about $7.5 million that would be taxed.
So each of the kids get 2.5.
Exactly. Which is different than the 1/3, 1/3.
Got it.
So that's something that I'll make a note, and we'll do the exact numbers. You and I have kind of roughed this. We'll do the exact numbers. So this is kind of, as it stands, where we're at. Let me ask you a question. Is this something that you're concerned about, the transfer tax issue? Is that something that you want us also to discuss?
Well, it sort of feels a shame to have built up a $20 million number by hook or by crook or however we managed to do it. And my actual kids only get $2.5 million each, and that's a terrible thing to say because I didn't have $2.5 million when I grew up, so I understand it's good money. But I wasn't imagining that I was imagining they'd end up with more.
Okay. All right. Well, so let's do this. I think we have a good snapshot of, as you and I discussed a second ago, the items that we want to address having to do with who gets what. We now have a good understanding of what the transfer tax situation is. So next what I'd like to do is spend a few minutes sharing with you potentially what the solutions might look like. And those solutions are sometimes product, sometimes they're investment related, and sometimes they're legal related. So I'll take some time to share with you what I think makes the most sense and explain it to you. And then we can decide together which one of those things we'd like to explore further.
Okay.
Okay? To do is share with you what the devices are that you have available to you to help overcome some of the challenges we've been discussing, whether it's estate taxes or figuring out a way to get the real estate portfolio down to your kids. There's some very specific tools that we have. All of them are connected to gifting. So when clients think about giving something away, their main focus typically is making sure that they retain the control they want, that they have the income that they want, that it doesn't impact their lifestyle, and then it doesn't have a negative impact on their children. So that's the main focus. When we talk about gifting, there's rules, and we talked about them a little bit prior when we were looking at your estate planning and your trust. There's two main rules that govern gifting. The first one is what you can do annually, and right now you're not doing any.
13, whatever it is per person, right?
$13,000 per person. And the other is your lifetime gift. And we talked about using that. That's the $5.2 million when we did the diagram, how that credit worked. So the rule of thumb is if you can give something to your kids, we would like to give them $1 and have the IRS think that it's worth less. Because we only have so many dollars. We have $5.2 million that we can give away. So most of what I'm going to talk about has to do with discounting. Our desire to try to give something and have it worth less when the kids receive it. I'll explain that a little bit. Okay? You're used to working with partnerships, because you have partnerships. The first thing I would show you is something called a family limited partnership. It can also be structured, if you've heard of an LLC.
Yeah, my attorney keeps trying to get me to do a limited liability corporation because of the real estate.
From the standpoint of transferring wealth to the kids, or actually the liability protection?
The liability protection.
Okay, well that's good. So this might actually do two things at once.
Okay,
when we
well
talk
he would
it
be
through.
happy.
Most of what I'm talking about now is how it impacts the estate plan and reducing your estate and retaining control, as we discussed. So the first thing you would do is we would create this FOP or this LLC. We would put in it an asset. Now if I look at the assets that you have, the real estate that you have, the rental properties that are not encumbered, the $8 million.
You mean the fourplexes?
The fourplexes, exactly. That $8 million is a kind of a classic asset that you would put in here because it has no liabilities against it. It doesn't have to be that asset. We can talk about the commercial properties too, but there's lending on there, and that makes this more complicated. But just in way of an example, if we put $8 million in here, right now we've created this FOP, we put that in there, and you own all of it, so nothing really has changed. We would create, depending on the type of entity, non-controlling and controlling shares.
Like a general partner.
Exactly. And of course, if we wanted the most egregious kind of example, we would say the controlling shares was 1% and the non-controlling was 99%. And so far we haven't done anything different. You have the whole thing.
Right.
The next thing that we would consider doing is creating a vehicle for your children. People can think of this as a gift trust, an asset trust, a kids trust. There's lots of different names, but basically you would create this trust for the benefit of your 3 children and the grandchildren. And you would write the rules in this vehicle to determine exactly how everybody got what they got, and you would probably have Sam be the trustee, because you can't be the trustee of this trust. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
So all that we've done is we've created our family limited partnership. You put your shares of your real estate in there. We created a trust for the kids. So that's what we've done so far. The next thing that we can do is actually give away, plus for the kid, the non-controlling interest. So if we wanted to take the maximum use of this, we would gift 99% share of all the controlling interest in here. So basically we've gifted $8 million into this trust. You would retain 1%, which is the controlling interest. Now, so far, what we've done is we've given away all the assets to a trust on behalf of the kids. You wrote all the rules in that trust that dictate how the kids are going to get it, and Sam is going to manage it. Does that make sense so far?
Manage the property or manage the trust?
Actually, he manages the trust and all the assets within it.
But
So-
I'm still managing the property.
Right. So, Sam, the nature of giving, actually, have you owned limited partnership shares of anything before? So you understand that you can't encumber it, you can't demand loans, you can't demand income, you can't do any of that?
I mean, he's not really managing very much here. He's
managing the trust. Yeah, he manages the assets within the trust, and you manage the property because you can't do a whole lot because you have the controlling interest. Actually, which is exactly why you might do this, because it looks like, from the surface, we made a gift of $8 million, right? For the reasons that you just shared, you can take a discount. And the discount is because this trust and Sam doesn't have full use as we described, and they can't encumber and they can't demand income. So a discount that we would normally recognize is right around 30%. Could be a little higher, a little bit lower. We would work with your estate planning attorney to determine that exact discount. But basically this goes along with the theme we were talking about. Can I give away $1 and have it recognized as being less? And for this reason, we would see about a $2.4 million discount. Does that make sense so far? 30% of the $8 million?
Because it's not marketable.
You got it. So the true gift in this case is right around $5.6 million in our estimate. So the theory would be if we had an $8 million gift into the trust and we were able to discount it to 5.6, we would use your 5.25 million of your ability to give away your lifetime credit. Now we would match this up so we don't go over. Now if we try to look at what we've accomplished here, okay, today in 2013, we gave away something with $8 million. You contain the controlling interest of it. We've discounted by $2.4 million, so we saved this year about $1.2 million of taxes because of the discount. That disappeared. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So in 2013, we saved $1.2 million. If we look out 20 years, what do you think it might be worth 20 years? Maybe double?
Hopefully.
So 16 million? If it's worth 16 million in 20 years, you can see what we did is we got the growth in the kids' trust. It's not in your estate. So this is called a discount and a freezing technique. We got the discount and we froze the growth in the kids' estate. So in 2032, 20 years from now, that extra 8 million of growth actually saved the estate at a 50% rate about $4 million in taxes, transfer taxes. So in total, over a 20-year period, we will have saved about $5.2 million, immediately 1.2. Now, some of the things to be aware of is we have to be very careful when you're giving away, even if you're giving away non-controlling interests. If you give away more than 50%, we want to take a close look and see how that's going to impact the property taxes, because this trust now will own it. I don't know how long you've had this, but in California, we want to be careful to make sure that we're not stepping up your property taxes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The second thing we would take a close look at is the income, because income is proportionate to ownership. So we'd want to have a conversation about how much income you're taking out of this. There's a few ways to do it. Right now, they would get about 99% of the income minus the expenses to run the property. You can take a management fee, and it has to be reasonable and customary. So some people would say, I'll just take all of it as a management fee. So that's a conversation that you and I would have to get a better idea of whether this makes sense. Do you know about right now how much income you're getting from this?
Yeah, well, I get around $40,000 a month from the fourplexes. Is that right? Yeah.
Okay.
And about $50,000 a month from the commercial properties.
Okay. So about $500,000 and $600,000 a year. Does that seem right? Okay. Do you know what your expenses are generally?
Well, without taking any money out of the investments, I've got about $1 million of income, $1.1 million of income, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before I take it out of the investments. I haven't taken it out of the IRA yet. And I pay taxes on that, and at the end of the year, I have about $200,000 left. So
Okay.
I've always figured I spend somewhere between $350 and $400.
Do you know what your effective tax rate? Your marginal tax rate obviously is high. Do you know how much at the end of the day you pay taxes on?
I don't.
After your deductions?
I don't. I give you the tax return.
Okay. Yeah, we take a look at it. It's probably somewhere in the 30 to 40%.
It feels right. I would say
All in?
40, but
Yeah. And if it is 40%, basically on 1.1 million, right, you've got a little over 400,000 of taxes. So you've got about $700,000 coming in, and you're saying you've got about 200,000 left over.
yeah, a little more than that.
A little more than that.
Yeah.
So you're probably spending somewhere between 450 and 500,000.
Right. Now
a
that
year?
includes whatever I've done for the kids and going on vacations, and I just don't. This sounds terrible, but I don't have to think about what I spend,
Yeah.
so I don't think.
And that makes sense. And what we would do is make sure that if we're doing something like this, that we're leaving you enough cash flow so it doesn't interfere with this. This is the tail wagging the dog theory. The tax planning should not have a major impact on your lifestyle. Okay, so it looks to me in this first analysis there's about 200,000 left over total. So we probably do not want to transfer all of the asset to the kids because of the income that follows it.
Right, and the other thing is I'm not taking anything out of any of my liquid investments. So
You could look at
we could
substituting.
factor that in
Okay.
and see what that means.
Okay, so if we were to do this today, if everything else worked and we'd have to figure out the cash flow, today we'd save about $1.2 million. And we have about a little over $7 million transfer tax, not including the IRA in total. So it doesn't get us all the way there, but this gives you a good example how you can give something away and get a discount and save taxes today and then get the growth out of your estate. The other thing that we might consider is potentially giving away some of your liquidity. Now, I have concerns about that, so let me share that with you.
Well, I don't want to give away the liquidity because that's what brought me in here. I'm concerned I don't have enough liquidity.
So I agree. So there are some concepts that talk about how you can give away stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, but I don't think it's a large enough part of your estate, which you've already figured out. So the next thing that we would really concentrate is your ability to gift and the impact that that can have. So if we were to do a family limited partnership, we know that we've got about $1.2 million today that we can resolve on the transfer taxes. The other thing that we can do is actually relatively simple. If we look at your estate and you're in control of approximately $20 million, what you might do first is again create what I call a kids trust or a gift trust. Do that first. And then again, you would write the rules in that trust, which would dictate how the kids were to get it. And again, you would pick the trustee, and we were saying that Sam would probably be our trustee. In this case, what you could do is just simply take advantage of your ability to gift that $13,000 each year that you're not. And if I count up all of your kids and your grandkids, which you can gift on behalf of at $13,000 each, it's about $117,000 a year. So putting aside whether you would gift all of it or not, I just want to make sure that you understand what your option is. You could gift each year $117,000 into this kids trust. And the reason you would do it is you'd be moving it out of your estate where you know it's growing and subject to more taxes, and you'd be able to kind of collar it inside this vehicle that could be used to pay future estate taxes. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
The question becomes, once you put it in, what you do with it. Now, obviously, like any trust, you can invest in stocks, bonds, mutual funds, all the things that you can identify and give the trust authority to invest in. Real estate, alternative investments, partnerships, all of that. The truth is, right here, this is a great example of why life insurance might make sense to put it here. So if you think about the way you used life insurance last time when your husband was alive, you specifically designed it to provide liquidity for loans. That's what its function was, and that's exactly what it did. Clients would use life insurance in this trust to do the same thing. If we know that we have approximately a $7 or a $6 million liability, depending on what else you do, it would make sense to consider putting a $7 million contract in here, and then you would use some of the gifting to pay for that. So if you think about it, the gifting goes into the trust. The trustee will decide how to invest it. If they choose to invest it in a life insurance contract, if that's what you want to do, that would provide a guaranteed liquidity.
And you're saying that would be better than investing it in
Well, that's a
stocks
good
or bonds
question.
or real estate or something?
That's actually the analysis that you would look at. We could, depending on your health and depending on the cost of the insurance, we would do that analysis and give you guidance on that. I mean, intuitively, you know that $117,000 has to go to $17 million at a certain rate of return. If you were to die prematurely, then there may not be the money there.
Sure.
The reason that clients consider using life insurance is because the guaranteed nature of the insurance. So we can have a discussion about the different products that are used. But at this point, we know that one of your primary goals is to make sure that your estate is not liquidated to pay taxes, that your children have use of this real estate portfolio to support them and support the education for your grandchildren. So a lot of clients would take a look at this and say the major function of the insurance is to guarantee that outcome. The economics is probably the secondary function.
Well, I can't do both, because I can't give away the income from this property and still have $100,000 a year to give. I can't do both.
Right, so I think what our job is to take a look at today, how it affects you and how it affects your heirs, and in the future, maybe 10 or 15 years, how it affects you and your heirs between both devices, and see which one gives you the maximum impact, which one makes the most sense. Does that make sense? Because actually, this is, in a family limited partnership, in a kids trust structure like this, the trust itself could actually own the insurance too. So there's a couple ways to make it work. Our job is to help you understand the impact of doing it in each one of the devices.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It sounds like a lot of math to me.
Yes, that's what we do.
Okay.
Yes.
If you do the math, I'll read the math.
Yes.
I'm good at math.
Yeah. No, that's actually, so in all seriousness, what we want to do when we come back is take some time to go over that. So when I see you next time, I'm going to have a list of what I think of as the most important issues that you're concerned about that we would discuss with your estate planning attorney. And I'll have done the number crunching here to help you understand what would be the cost of this trust if it had insurance on your life. What would be the impact if we did the gifting into the family limited partnership and the kids trust, and which one of those would provide you the biggest bang and the least amount of aggravation. I guess that's probably the best way to look at it. So before we meet next time, there's a couple things I'd like to ask you about. When it comes to the insurance, Morgan Stanley does business with all of the largest insurance companies across the country. The carriers that Morgan Stanley works with are the most competitive. They have all the products available, and we shouldn't have any problem trying to isolate a contract or a product that would work best for you. The numbers I come back to, I want them to be meaningful numbers. And the best way for me to do that is to ask you some questions.
Well, we're not talking about my making a decision about whether this is the thing to do right now.
Right.
Okay.
No, that's correct. And actually, we wouldn't go to the insurance companies right now. We have the ability to understand pretty closely how they would, what offers they would make you, and that'll allow us to do some pricing surveys and bring that back to you. What's your birthday?
January 2nd, 1947.
Okay. Do you smoke?
No.
Okay. Have you had any history of cancer?
No.
Have you had any history of heart disease?
No.
Do you have any, are you taking or do you have any blood pressure history?
No, the only thing I have is high cholesterol, and it's controlled by medication.
What medication are you taking?
Pravastatin.
And how much are you taking?
40 milligrams.
Is that each day?
Mm?
How long have you been taking the medication for cholesterol?
6 or 7 years.
Okay. Has it been stable that whole time?
No, it's gone up a couple of times over that time, and they've increased the dosage.
Ah, okay. When was the last time you had a dosage increase?
6 months ago.
Okay,
Not
so it
that
sounds
long
like
ago.
it's hereditary.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It is.
Okay. Are you taking any other medications right now?
My cardiologist tells me to take baby aspirin, but
Okay, so and why do you have a cardiologist?
5 years ago, 6 years ago, my GP said I should go to a cardiologist.
Oh, okay.
And I've gone twice.
Oh, okay, so it's just normal
Checkups.
Normal checkups?
EKG,
Okay.
Stuff like that.
Okay. Have you had any history of diabetes?
No.
Okay. And as far as family history goes, any history of any of these with your parents?
Yeah, both my parents died of cancer. The father that's alive is my stepfather, but both of my biological parents died of cancer.
How old were they when they passed away?
My mother was 84, my father was 69.
Okay. And your sister Judy?
She's fine.
No health issues? Okay. Excellent. Let me ask you a little bit about the advisors that you work with. I know you work with your financial advisor here at the firm. Is there anybody else in your life? It sounds like Sam helps you make decisions. Anybody else in your life help you make financial decisions?
Not really. And I would want Sam involved in this once we decide what we're going to do. But nobody else.
Okay. And you've worked with your trust attorney. Is that a local trust attorney?
The guy that wrote my trust? Yeah, Bill George.
Okay.
This is the third time we've done
okay.
something together.
Do you know, is he an estate tax? I've never worked with him before.
He's an estate he specializes in estate planning. He's in a bigger firm, and he's
Okay.
an estate specialist.
Excellent. Okay. So we are going to, I think what we would do after our next meeting, we get a good idea of the path we want to go. I would like to talk to him. It would give us an opportunity to explain to him exactly the analysis that we've done, the discussions we've had with you, and certainly we want him to give us his input on that. I don't think we need to talk to him yet, but I probably will be asking you in the future to give him permission to speak to me.
Sure.
So we can share everything, if that's okay with you. Okay. And there's a couple things that we talked about that I'm going to need more information from you directly. Is it okay if I give you a call?
Sure, sure.
Can you give me your phone number?
Yeah, 310-455-9519.
Okay. Okay. I think that's pretty much everything that we need to do. I'd like to schedule a time for us to meet again while I'm here with you. If you have your calendar, maybe we can schedule something for a couple of weeks out.
Okay.
Does that
sure.
make sense?
Mhm.
And then I'll call you. I will call you before the next thing just to kind of go over the agenda to make sure that if you have any other questions, you've thought of anything, that you can share it with me, and then we'll be able to get together. And at that point, we'll really take a close look at, as I said, how these different devices will impact you and which makes the most sense to proceed. And from there, we'll take our next steps. All right? Thank you.